crown and silence. Immersive audio stories.
Hello, I'm Mikael. I write copywriting, brand voice, stories. And this channel is about the last one. Stories. The days slid into weeks. The fog over Yorkshire lay heavy as a wet grey blanket across Ashford Hall. And Lily's life was pressed into a new, relentless rhythm. 5 o'clock every morning, the iron strike of the corridor clock cutting through the darkness. Cold feet against the biting stone floor. The same ritual, the same submission. Life as kitchen maid was an improvement. She was spared the ice-cold zinc sink, the heavy slop buckets waiting for her in the rat's darkness. She had a real cotton mattress now, and £18 a year. But improvements could also be chains, just sewn in softer fabric. The work was still a torment. Her hands were no longer blue from cold. Now they were red, scalded, constantly throbbing from the heat of the boiling water on the range. Her fingers were dotted with small white burn marks, as if the fire itself had left its teeth in her skin. And her hair, tightly tucked beneath her cap, always carried a faint, suffocating smell of fried bacon and sweat. And everywhere, silent, still, watchful as a spider in its web, was Mrs. Hargreaves. She rarely spoke directly to Lily. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Sour as vinegar, lips a hard white line, gaze poisonous as arsenic. She was simply waiting for a mistake, one single mistake, as if her entire world depended on that moment. The revenge came on a Thursday morning, just before midday. Lily didn't know it then, but something in the air was different the moment her name was called. She was summoned to the library. The smell of leather, old paper, and whiskey hit her at the door, heavy as an omen. Lord Harrington sat at his desk, but it was Mrs. Hargreaves who owned the room. She stood before him, rigid, motionless, like a statue that had been waiting for precisely this moment.
My lord.
Her voice trembled, not from fear, from a suppressed, caustic triumph.
The new girl, Grace. I must report a theft.
Lily felt the blood drain from her face. She stood in the doorway, hands clasped so hard that her nails cut into her palms. Her heart beat against her chest like a trapped drum.
I saw her take this from the dining room.
Mrs. Hargreaves continued. She raised the silver candlestick like evidence before a judge.
The scratch here is new. She must have made it when she hid it in her chest.
Lord Harrington lifted his gaze from his papers, slowly, as if every centimeter was a deliberate threat. His eyes were cold as cracks in ice when they found Lily. Grace? The single word carried more weight than an entire accusation. Lily opened her mouth, but the voice that came out was barely more.
Never, my lord. I swear, on my life, I would never.
Then another voice, trembling, yes, but clear as a knife through the silence. It is a lie, my lord. Annie, the young housemaid from Leeds, stepped forward from the shadow in the corridor, as if she had torn herself loose from the darkness itself. She was pale, but her gaze was steady, almost defiantly steady. "Forgive me, my lord," she said, and curtsied so quickly her skirt rustled. "But I saw Mrs. Hargreaves in the dining room yesterday evening when she believed she was alone." She swallowed, but continued. She took the candlestick and she scratched it with a knife from the kitchen. 3 blows, fast as whip cracks, or like a verdict that had already fallen. The cane struck Mrs. Hargreaves' hand, where she still clutched the candlestick. 1, 2, 3. Each blow cut through the room, echoing against the paneling like distant shots. The candlestick fell with a sharp metallic ring. Mrs. Hargreaves barely moved. She did not cry. She did not make a single sound, but her face drained in a way that resembled a passing of death. "You lie in my house," he said, his voice low, not agitated, not even stern, just dangerously indifferent. Again. He regarded her the way one might regard something crawling on the floor. "You are dismissed immediately. No reference, no wages. You will be out of my house before 6 o'clock. The words did not fall as threats. They fell as decrees, laws hewn in stone. At 5:30, Mrs. Hargreaves stood at the servants' entrance. The household staff were lined up along the cold corridor, a dark, silent wall of people. Every gaze held low, not out of respect, out of ritual. Her fall had become a procession. But Lily saw something the others were trying to conceal. The small, sidelong smiles at the corners of their eyes. Relief. A silent revenge for years of fear. In her hand, Mrs. Hargreaves carried a worn cardboard case, uncannily like the one Lily herself had carried in when everything began. The scent of lavender that had always surrounded her now smelled sour, as if something had rotted in the perfume itself. No one spoke. No one said farewell. Not even a polite ma'am. Mrs. Hargreaves turned and walked out into the ice-cold December rain. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes. The gate swung shut behind her with a low, final thud, like a coffin closing. At 6 o'clock, Lily was called back to the library. The fire still burned, casting moving golden shadows across the paneling. Lord Harrington sat at his desk, as still as if he had not moved in an hour. He regarded her in silence, a long, measuring gaze that seemed to weigh her against the house itself. "Mrs. Hargreaves' position is vacant," he said at last. "Housekeeper, £40 a year, your own room, full authority over everyone beneath you." The words fell heavily, as if filling the entire room with a new law. Lily swallowed. Her hands, still red and scalded from the day's work, trembled faintly.
I am not ready, my lord. I do not know how."
An almost imperceptible movement passed across the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, rather the shadow of one. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet. A house such as this requires more understanding." He let the silence stretch, as if he were savoring the sight of her standing there, small, trembling, still covered in the day's labor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, softened by the firelight. "But I could move you," he said, "away from the kitchen, closer to me, as my private attendant." It was not merely the words, it was the way he said them, softly, almost too softly, as if he were running his hand across something he wished to possess. "You have been treated unjustly," he continued. "That needs to be rectified." He leaned forward across the desk until the firelight caught his eyes and made them dark as wet steel. "You would have more freedom. £25 a year, your own room, up here, a different manner of dress." Lily stood motionless. The rain struck hard against the windows behind her, a cold rhythm that penetrated all the way to the marrow. Before her the fire burned, a dull, ravenous heat. His offer hung between them like a smoke that could not be breathed through. It was not merely a position, it was a shift of place in the world, an entrance into his sphere, something that carried promises and threats. Lily opened her mouth, but no words came, only a sharp, silent intake of breath that tasted of burnt dust and rain. She stood fixed between the fire's heat behind him and the cold draft seeping in from the corridor. His offer remained in the air, heavy as smoke. Private attendant, a role that carried as much freedom as imprisonment. She felt her heart racing, a hard, bolting animal in her chest. To say yes meant proximity, his gaze, his demands, his world. To say no meant the kitchen, the burns, the rats, Mrs. Poole's shouts. A life of toil without end. She lifted her gaze carefully. Lord Harrington did not look threatening. That was the worst of it. He looked interested, and that made her skin tighten, as if someone were drawing a cold thread along her spine. "My lord?" Her voice was faint, but clear.
"I do not know what would be right."
Not a yes, not a no, just the truth. Bare as her wounded hands, hidden in the folds of her apron, He raised an eyebrow, slowly, as if weighing her words, as if her hesitation were a gift he had not expected. And in that moment she understood the most dangerous thing of all. He did not like obedience. He liked resistance. The silence stretched so long she could hear her own pulse, a dull beat in her temples. The fire hissed, threw a red light across his face, making the shadows move across his cheekbones like something living. Lily drew a deep breath. It was warm and heavy, full of whiskey and smoke. She felt her knuckles whiten as she clasped her hands before her. She lifted her gaze. Not much, just the breadth of the finger, but enough. His eyes caught hers immediately, as if he had been waiting for precisely that movement. Something in his gaze changed, as if he were drawing an invisible cord around her rib cage and pulling it taut. "My lord," she began, and her voice nearly broke on the first word. She swallowed, tried again. "My lord, The words caught in her throat, as if her entire life, her entire existence were lodged there. She thought of her mother, of frost on the window, of hands bleeding in the sink, of the attic where the cold crept into her lungs like ice. And she thought of the room beside his, of warmth, of danger. "I accept," she said at last, quietly but clearly. A yes that could not be taken back. Not a surrender, not a prayer, just a straight line from her chest to his. A choice and a price. Lord Harrington stopped turning the whiskey glass. The glass went still. The small movement at the corner of his mouth returned, but now there was something different in it. Not a smile, a kind of satisfaction, deeper, more dangerous. "Good," he said quietly. The fire made his voice darker. "We begin tomorrow." Lily lowered her gaze, but not from shame, rather to conceal how much she was trembling. There were paths one could never retrace, and she had just stepped onto one of them. And the whispers, she could already hear them. The sound of Mrs. Poole and the other maids in the servants' hall, muffled voices absorbed by stone and wood. The Lord's whore. Followed by that stifled laughter that always came when gossip tasted blood. Mrs. Hargreaves' warning voice echoed in her head. "I told you so. He takes what he wants." This was a different kind of danger, a quieter, sweeter path to ruin. The kind of path that ended with a swollen belly, a screaming child, and a door slammed shut behind her. Dismissed, dishonored, turned out without a reference. Back to Whitechapel, but this time not as the girl who tried to survive, as the woman who had fallen. Her gaze dropped to the fire. The flames moved like something living across the wood. 25 pounds against her soul. She forced herself to look up, just for a moment. His eyes caught hers immediately. Dark, intense, glowing in the red light from the fireplace. He held her gaze, not by force, but with the kind of power that made the world contract, until only two people remained in it. The scent of him struck her. Bergamot, leather, and pure, indisputable authority. Stronger than the whiskey, stronger than the fire. It was dangerous. She lowered her head. The choice had already been made. It had never been hers to make. Yes, my lord. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it held steady, unshaken. A smile spread across his lips. Not warm, never warm, but a smile that acknowledged ownership. "Good girl," he said. "Tomorrow morning we begin. 6 o'clock, at my door." Lily curtsied. She turned, her back straight, despite the fact that her legs were trembling beneath her. She walked toward the door, felt his gaze follow her like a hand between her shoulder blades. She closed the door quietly. The dull click as the lock fell into place echoed in the empty corridor, like a trap closing shut. Saturday, the 11th of December, 1908. The clock in the corridor struck 6, a muffled stroke of metal in a sleeping house. Ashford Hall lay still, heavy with the shadows of the night. But not Lily. She was standing outside his door. Her new uniform felt unfamiliar, almost as if it belonged to someone else. This was no longer the kitchen's coarse cotton. This was black silk, soft against the skin. The apron of finest batiste was so thin that the light almost passed through it. In her hand was heavy brass, cold against her wounded fingers. The corridor, but beneath that, his scent, seeping through the gap in the door. Dark, masculine, insistent. 6 o'clock precisely. She pressed down the handle. The door slid open without a sound. The room was dark. The only light came from the open fireplace, where the coals glowed in a low, pulsing radiance. The heat lay heavy in the air, like a warm breath against her skin. The bed was a vast island of silk sheets and shadows, a dark silhouette at the center of the ember's halo. And he was awake. He was not lying down. He sat half upright against the pillows, as if he had not slept at all, as if he had been waiting. The silk morning robe was open, exposing his bare chest, a landscape of skin and shadow that caught the fire's reflections. His hair was disheveled from sleep, but his eyes were not drowsy. They were clear, alert, fixed solely on her, where she stood in the doorway. There was no hesitation in them, no surprise, only a calm, assured ownership.
Crown and silence, immersive audio stories.